Thank you very much. And as Mark mentioned, I have been involved with the Chamber over a long period of time. In a previous life, I worked for a bank. And while I was at the bank, I was very involved in the local community, including the local Chamber of Commerce, and then got involved with the State Chamber of Commerce. And it was just a wonderful experience. And I'm so delighted to see just the enthusiasm, the spirit that I can feel coming from the State Chamber now. And I love the fact that you all are getting involved in interviewing candidates for office and making political decisions that affect you. And it's very important. It's tough out there right now. As you know, the economy has not rebounded as it normally does coming out of recessions, and it's a very anemic recovery at best, and it's very concerning to us. And we're proud in Virginia that we've been able to maintain the quality of services that the Commonwealth traditionally provides without having to raise taxes and without having to add on to the bureaucracy and the regulation. And I hope we can continue to do that this session. It's always a challenge. I'm delighted to have a governor who shares our thoughts and shares our views, and it's really great working with Governor McDonald. I must tell you, it's somewhat fun working with 67 other Republican members in my caucus. And it's interesting watching what's happening in the Senate. Yesterday was a good example of probably what's going to happen a lot this session, and that is there's no margin for error over there, and some of these votes that require a supermajority give the Democrats the opportunity to kind of jam things up, and that's the legislative process. That's how things work, and we will work through it. And the end of the day, I hope we'll be out of here on March 10th on time, having delivered a budget that continues to fund those core services that the Commonwealth is responsible for, and at the same time doesn't raise taxes and hopefully decreases to an extent the regulatory burdens on businesses in Virginia. I was looking, we had a press conference about a week ago talking about the things that the Republican caucus in the House was pursuing, as far as it goes for creating jobs and as far as helping the economic climate in Virginia. We've enjoyed for many years under both Democrat and Republican governors, under both Democrat and Republican legislatures, a great reputation for being a place in this country where businesses can grow and flourish and prosper. And we're continuing to take that as a very important charge. Virginia, as you know, is always ranked, has recently always been ranked either #1 or #2 in a lot of the surveys as the best place in which to do business. That's something that we cherish and something that we don't get easily. We have to continue to work on it. We have some legislation in this year on the House side, I know, that deals specifically with some of those issues, expanding the major facility tax credit, which has been very helpful in helping to lure and create more jobs in Virginia. The one that I'm very interested in, that I think is probably as important as any other that we're dealing with, is a bill that's been put in by Barbara Comstock and Tim Hugo, both from Fairfax, that would restrict the use of project labor agreements, PLAs, which I'm sure, as everyone in this room knows, would kind of violate our right to work rules that we have in Virginia that are enshrined in Virginia by basically requiring that some of these large mega projects be union. And the one that comes to mind right now is the second phase of the rail to Dulles, Metro to Dulles. And it's very important if that project is to succeed, if that project is to continue, that it be open to competitive bidding and cost containments that can be achieved by not requiring union labor. The other side has sort of drawn a line in the sand. Again, fortunately, in the House there's only 32 of them, but in the Senate that line can be wider, and they are, I think, siding with their union allies that this is bad legislation. They're going to do all they can do to kill it. So I know that it's on your radar screen, but anything that you can do to urge and communicate with your elected House members and senators would, I'm sure, be helpful. Barry pointed out a great point, and that is that it's so important that you all communicate. One of the great things, and I say this every year when I come before this group, one of the great things about being in the Virginia legislature is we're only in session for 2 months, and then that means we're back home in the community 10 months out of the year. And they don't pay us enough to live off of, so we all have to have other jobs. And we're working in the community, we know what's happening in the community, and the community sees us and talks to us. I always repeat the story, and you'll have to forgive me because I only know about 3 stories, and I say them over and over again. But on my way to work in the morning, I usually stop at a Wawa and get a cup of coffee. It's only $1 a cup, any size, in January, so I'm kind of missing out on that while I'm down here. But invariably, someone will come up to me while I'm getting coffee and say, hey, why in the world did you do that? Or good job on this, or why doesn't the state consider doing this? And I must say, and I also say this all the time, but it's certainly true, I haven't had an original idea since I've been in the legislature. Probably goes back further than that, but I can't remember much further back. But I've gotten some great ideas from people at Wawa or on the street or coming up to me. I think one of the things that I'm most proud of having accomplished in the legislature is the conservation tax credit that has enabled, we think, probably 400,000 or 500,000 acres of land to be protected. And it's a free market type of deal where if you want to put your land in this credit, you can get a financial tax credit for it. If you can't use that tax credit, you can sell it to someone that can. And it's really, really improved our efforts, enhanced our efforts to protect more land. And that wasn't my idea. A guy that I used to coach soccer with up in McLean 35 years ago gave it to me. He thought it would be a neat idea, and we slipped it on through past the Senate. They weren't aware of what they were voting on, and and it's the law now, and it's been enormously successful. But that's just an idea, and the reason I'm pointing this out is it's so important for each and every person in this room to get to know your local legislator and to feel free on going to them and saying, you know, what you think. What's a good pro-business idea? They don't know all the ideas. You all don't know all the ideas, but between the two of you, you can probably come up with some good stuff. So I encourage you to take advantage of the fact that your legislators are part-time legislators. They are back in the community 10 months out of the year. They are your neighbors. They go to church with you. They go to work with you or whatever. So go to Wawa. Stop by and see them. I told Barry earlier that I wasn't really sure what he or you all wanted me to talk about, but what I find really helpful is just to open it up to questions and answers. And I'd be happy to try and answer or discuss some questions that you have, some ideas that you might have, things about legislation that's before us right now that's coming up. Any questions? Or?
We got about 10 minutes.
Okay. Yes. And you'll have to speak loudly because I'm losing my hearing at my old age.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm Holly Kenneth from McLean. There's a rumor up on the Hill yesterday, which may be out of date by now, that you're all going to have a special session on tax reform. Can you either confirm, deny, or defer?
Well, there has been talk about it. Both, I can't speak for the governor, but he and I have chatted a little bit about that. I think there is a lot of opportunity for reforming our tax code. I really do believe that one of the huge problems we have at the national level is we have a tax code that's so complicated and so confusing and is so ridden with, I hate to call them loopholes, but they're loopholes, that it needs to be addressed, and we need to do that in Virginia as well. Jay Lark did a study recently that some of you may have seen that pointed out that literally billions of dollars are expended each year in Virginia on tax credits, some of which maybe have outlived their usefulness. And Mike Thompson, who is from up in Northern Virginia and has the Jefferson group, Jefferson, whatever they call them, Thomas Jefferson Institute, has done a lot of work on expanding the sales tax but lowering the rates significantly. And really that's a lot of what they need to do up in Washington, and that is expand the tax base but lower the rates. Whether though, it's probably beyond the scope of being able to handle in a normal 60-day session with all the other things that are there. So if something like that, if there were enough interest in doing something like that, it would be in a special session, I suspect. Whether or not the governor's going to call it, he's coming at 12:30. You ought to ask him. But I really don't know. I would like to see some reform done on the tax situation, but whether we do it this year or next or whatever, not sure. Mike.
Mr. Speaker, could you just give us a brief overview of what you think will be the 3 or 4 major issues besides the budget that you all are going to be dealing with this session?
3 or 4 major issues we'll be dealing with besides the budget. Well, of course, the budget's the main issue, and that drives so much, and I suspect that's what'll happen. I think it's important. I think a big issue is going to be this session, the news that I'm running for governor, and. I don't know if you all saw General Cuccinelli just came in, so I thought I think this PLA agreement is going to be a big issue, and that's going to be a hard-fought issue. I believe that the governor has, I think, taken one of the other big issues off the table, and that's uranium mining in Pennsylvania County. As probably everyone in here knows, the governor suggested that we draw the regulations that would govern the mining if the moratorium or if the mining were allowed. And I think that makes sense. I think we can make better decisions if we see what's going to govern the mining. Goodness gracious, what are some other issues? You know, what's a big issue to one person may not be to another. I think, I'm trying to think of, what issues do you all think are big? What are you hearing about? What do you got, Mike, besides that?
Oh, you know, we're always concerned, obviously, about transportation up in Northern Virginia.
Well, that's a good transportation. I was afraid somebody asked that. I thought we fixed that a couple of years ago. But the governor has proposed. I mean, I don't think anyone will deny that we have a funding problem, particularly for the maintenance portion of our transportation budget. And the projections we see are that it's running about $400 or $500 million a year short, and that money has to come out by law, has to come out of the construction side of the ledger. And you're going to get to the point if we don't do something that everything will be spent on maintenance. There'll be very little left for construction. I would like to say that we have done significant things on the construction side over the last couple of years because we were able to accelerate a commitment to fund highway construction with some bonds. To last year and this year, the governor's been able to put over $3 billion in new money out just in this past year for highway construction. And a lot of that money gets leveraged through public-private partnerships. And I think at the end of the day, the governor has calculated that we'll probably be able to put $6 or $7 billion in money for new construction over the next couple of years. But that doesn't address the maintenance situation. One of the problems with dealing with the maintenance situation, a lot of people say, well, just raise the gas tax. Well, unfortunately, and I've said this for years, and I think it's beginning to become true, the gas tax is a dinosaur tax. It's a tax that is decreasing in value as people get better and better mileage in their cars, as there's an effort to buy more hybrids or hybrid-type vehicles, buy electric cars if they don't blow up on you. There will come a time, probably not in my lifetime, but maybe in Ken Cuccinelli's lifetime, where there's going to be some kind of alternative fuel, whether it be hydrogen or something or other that's going to come on. In other words, the gasoline tax is not the answer, I don't believe. And I think also, I was talking with one of my counterparts the other night. We were just chatting, and he's from down in Norfolk, and he said, Bill, I just don't like these tolls. And I said, well, how else are we going to pay for these mega projects down there, these tunnels and bridges and all that need to be built in Hampton Roads? He said, well, let's use the gas tax. And then he started telling me about some poor college students that were going to have to come from Suffolk and pay all these tolls to get to college. And I pointed out to him that you'd have to raise the gas tax a large amount to be able to do these mega projects. Each penny on the gas tax generates about $40 or $50 million, and so you're looking at 10, 20 cents a gallon on the gas tax increase to do that. This is not the right time to be raising the gas tax. We still are in tough economic times. It's a very regressive tax. I know, I suspect each one of you know, we have a couple we've been trying to help through the church, and they buy gasoline 2 gallons at a time because that's all they can afford. And it's just a tough way to do it. We have to look at an alternative way besides just tolls. Tolls are good for helping to fund major construction projects, but we have to find an alternative way to fund our maintenance situation. The governor's come up with a lot of proposals that'll add $200 or $300 million to that $400 or $500 million shortfall. I hope, and that's going to be a rough part to get some of those issues passed. What he's suggesting, I think is perfectly correct, is taking additional money out of the general fund, out of the sales tax, which goes into what we call our general fund as opposed to our transportation trust fund. And a lot of people say, oh, you're taking money from K-12. You can't take general fund money and use it for transportation. Well, we've been doing that since 1987. When we raised taxes in 1987, we also put a half penny on the sales tax directed to transportation. In addition to that half penny, we passed legislation in 2007, I believe, 2006, that takes a portion of the surplus. If there's ever a surplus in the budget, we take a portion of that and apply that to transportation funding. And we've been able to get well over $100 million in additional money from that source, and that's going to continue. So the governor's proposing we take a little bit more from the sales tax and apply that to highway maintenance. And I think that has I think it'll pass the House. I'm not sure how it'll do in the Senate, but I think that's a good thing. Oops, I'm getting the hook. Thank you all very much for having me. I certainly appreciate it.